Here at L4 Media, we talk high school football, 4A, 3A, and 2A in Texas. We talk East Texas sports. We talk NFL, guy talk, movie, and booze. We also talk wrestling and so much more. So like and subscribe and check us out.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And on the seventh day, baseball.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of the Texas Two-Seam podcast, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. How about that new intro, huh? That intro was put together by our guest that we'll talk with on today's show with Dr. Aaron Jackson. He's part of the Texas Rangers Fans Only Facebook page that we are partnered with here on the show. He's also a medical contributor on InsideTheDiamonds.com, another website that covers Major League Baseball. They have writers that cover each team, and he works closely with the writer that covers the Texas Rangers as a medical contributor, and he writes his own articles as well. So we'll have Dr. J on the show with us, and again, he put together that new intro. I thought it looked good. Just if you want to tell us how you feel about it and what you think, just let us know in the comments below, whether you're watching us on L4 Media's YouTube channel or listening to us on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining us today. We, as always, are presented by Carr Motor Company in downtown Cleburne. They're located at 302 South Caddo in downtown Cleburne. They're open Tuesday through Friday. They're open from 9 to 5:30, and then on Saturday they're open 9 to 3, closed Sunday and Mondays. And they have a special going on right now. If you mention Texas Two-Seam on your next phone call or visit to Carr Motor Company, they'll give you $200 off any vehicle purchase. That's classic or late model. Any vehicle purchase, you'll get $200 off if you mention Texas Two-Seam. And again, we are also now, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, now partnered with Manscaped. Manscaped is now an official sponsor of Texas Two-Seam, as well as Outdrink the Coverage. They've given us 2 codes. The one for Texas Two-Seam is, as you see on the screen, Two-Seam. Then for Outdrink the Coverage, we also have another code, ODTC, which both codes are active, and they will give you 20% off plus free shipping when you order online at manscaped.com. So go ahead and check out manscaped.com. And while you're there, check out the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. It includes the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer, the Weed Whacker 2.0 Ear and Nose Hair Trimmer, and the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave Lotion, the Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant, and the Magic Mat Disposable Mats. A full package, and it gives you everything you need to keep yourself manscaped at home and both on the road, including one of the 2 free gifts, the Shed 2.0 Toiletry and Travel Bag valued at $39.99, and the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo valued at $34.99. Both of those items completely free when you purchase the Performance Package 5.0 at manscaped.com. And again, you use codes 2SEAM or ODTC, you'll get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. So go ahead and check out manscaped.com. It costs nothing to look, but if you do find something that you can't live without, please be sure save yourself some money and some shipping costs by using our codes 2SEAM and ODTC for 20% off plus free shipping. And thanks again to Manscaped for their support of Texas 2SEAM as well as Outdrink the Coverage. We'll step aside for a quick break, and when we come back, Dr. J will join us for episode 7 of the Texas 2SEAM podcast. Lots to talk about for the Rangers. Evan Carter returns to the lineup on Sunday afternoon. Rangers dropped 2 of 3 to the Angels at home. A lot to talk about there, and kind of just in a funk right now offensively. Starting pitching, despite all the injuries and everything, has been doing very well, especially guys like John Gray and Michael Lorenzen. He pitched into the 7th inning on Sunday afternoon with a 1-0 lead for the majority of the game, but the Rangers coughed it up. They just can't get the bats going. The only run came off a Corey Seager solo blast on Sunday afternoon, but couldn't get much else going offensively, and that's kind of been the story for this team. In the early part of the season, I mean, we're still early, but throughout April and early May, it was more of a case of inconsistency. But now it just seems like they're in a true funk where they really can't get anything done offensively for the moment, and they're going to have a quick turnaround now, despite having now 12 players on the injured list with the return of Evan Carter. But they're going into Philly starting Tuesday. On Tuesday, Monday's a travel day, but on Tuesday they're starting their series on the road, a 3-game series at Philadelphia, a team with one of the best, I think if not the best record in baseball at 34-14 going into Tuesday. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. It'll be a tough 3-game series for the Rangers, but it's baseball. Things can happen. And when you look at the Phillies, they also have one of the easiest schedules when it comes to, strength of schedule. They've only played 3 games against teams that are above 500 record-wise, and in that 3-game series, they dropped 2 of 3. So interesting to see there. We'll see how the Rangers do when they start this road trip in Philadelphia, and we'll dive deeper into it once we talk with Dr. J here after the break. But thanks again. Thanks for your patience. Not putting out an episode last week. Hopefully that won't happen again. Hopefully nothing else comes up, but we'll try our best to crank out content for you guys weekly and as often as we can. And one more announcement before we go to break. So next Monday, live on this L4 Media YouTube channel, as well as the Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, wherever you catch your live streams of L4 Media's content, we will have our first ever baseball look back. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while and following Outdrink the Coverage, you've seen that they do a couple look backs when it comes to football and other topics as well. But this will be our first one when it comes to baseball, Major League Baseball. And for our first look back, we'll be covering the 1994-1995 Major League Baseball strike. It is the longest strike in league history, and it was the 8th one in the league's history. But again, it was the longest as far as in-season days go. It was a 99-day strike, but in totality, it was over 200 days. So one of the longest, if not the longest strike in Major League Baseball history. Now, obviously, being born in 2000, I did not live through that, but I will have Terry and Noe with me, the old dudes who lived through it. So I'll be doing my research and doing as much research as I can to kind of ride the ship. But they will be able to give more of a analysis because they experienced the whole thing firsthand. So that'll be a really fun topic next week. Again, that will be live on L4 Media's YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, all the platforms will be live next Monday night at 7:30. We will be live for the episode 8 of the Texas Two Seam podcast, which will be our first baseball look back with the 1994-1995 strike. So if you have any questions that you'd like to have for us going into that live stream, you can comment below on this video on YouTube, or you can comment on your favorite podcast platform as well. We'll kind of gather all the questions that you guys have. Or also, and this is also in the link below, go to the Texas Rangers Fans Only Facebook page and join us there. Join the group, and then I'll drop probably this upcoming Thursday or Friday. I'll probably drop a post in there where I'll be asking for your questions. So leave any questions you have down there for our first look back. Again, the 1994-1995 MLB strike. I know if you lived through that time, especially as a diehard baseball fan, you probably have strong opinions about that strike, and I want to hear them. I want to hear what you think about it, what questions you have for myself, and then Terry and Noe as well. But again, we'll be live with that next Monday, the 27th at 7:30 p.m. on all of L4 Media's social media and YouTube platforms. And then, of course, afterwards, it'll be posted in its totality on our podcast platforms as well, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, we'll have it posted afterwards on there as well. But as for today, episode 7, we appreciate you being here. We'll take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, Car Motor Company. Then when we come back, it'll be myself and Dr. Aaron Jackson to discuss the last 2 weeks of baseball and a lot of other topics as well. It was a fun conversation with Aaron, so stay tuned for that. And thank you again for tuning in to episode 7 of the Texas Two Seam podcast, presented by Car Motor Company and Manscaped as well. Again, remember, 20% off plus free shipping with codes 2Seam and ODTC. We'll talk to you right after this on Texas Two Seam. Car Motor Company is your destination for classic and late model vehicles in North Central Texas, located at 302 South Caddo in downtown Cleburne. They have everything you're looking for, from classic cars and trucks to late model cars and trucks, convertibles, and SUVs. If you'd like to call ahead of your visit, they can be reached at 817-666-1111. With inventory changing weekly, there's a little bit of everything at Car Motor Company. Be sure to visit the website www.txcar.com. That's www.txkar.com to keep up with their ever-changing inventory. They're open from 9 to 5:30 on Tuesday through Friday, and at 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock on Saturdays, closed Sunday and Monday. And also, if you mention this advertisement and Texas Two Seam during your next visit to Car Motor Company, they'll give you $200 off any vehicle purchase. Stop by Car Motor Company while you shop and eat in historic downtown Cleburne. Again, you can give them a call at 817-666-1111 or visit their website at www.txcar.com. That's www.txkar.com. And welcome back to the Texas Two Seam podcast, part of Outdrank the Coverage on L4 Media and presented by Car Motor Company in downtown Cleburne. My name is Ryan Fox, and joining us on the show today for the second time is Dr. Aaron Jackson. Aaron, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing well, sir. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on the show again today. And first off, I want to ask, or not ask, but kind of tell you again, I mentioned in the intro, I thought you did a phenomenal job on that new intro we have to the show.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. But how fun was that for you? I know that's kind of a new deal, especially with running the Texas Rangers Fans Only Facebook page. A lot of that graphics and video stuff is still kind of new to you. So, but I thought it looked fantastic. It kind of looked like you've been doing it for years. So how fun was that for you to put together?
It was a blast. I
Mm,
initially got into it and thought, oh, am I getting in over my head? But the more I
mm,
started to put it together and started finding clips and doing
mm,
different things, I thought, yeah, I'm really going to go for it. I think I can make kind of a funny intro with the Big Bang type thing, and then I can throw in some awesome Rangers clips and like bring it from
mm,
last year to now, run it
mm,
back, and have a whole theme, and then throw in your logo. And I thought, it would be cool to have a nice intro
mm,
bumper, and it'll be, it'll be nice. And then as I got to do it, it took a while. It was maybe like 5 hours or something.
mm.
But it was fun the whole time. I was just thinking ideas. Oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do this. Well, that's maybe too much, and
Yeah.
then I had to go find some copyright free music. And I think, well, he
Yeah.
might like this. He may not like this. Oh,
Mm,
that sounds ridiculous. And then I had to make all the videos sync up to the music. So like as the
mm,
music kicks back in, he's
yeah.
swinging and missing, and
Mm,
it all kind of works. It looks like it's seamless, but it was put together that way. And I had to do all of that kind of on the fly,
mhm,
learning as I go. But it's good because every time I do something like that, it's just better that I'm becoming, and more for
mhm.
the group. More video and content things coming in the future, because of just practicing. Practice makes perfect.
Yes, it does. I really thought it turned out great. And as well as your work with the
Glad you
Texas
like it.
Rangers. Oh yeah, I really do. It was awesome. We'll probably implement that on the show going forward. I really did thought it was great, and just again, we mentioned it at the top of the show. Just let us know what you think in the comments below, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on your favorite podcast streaming platform. Just let us know what you think, and then we might work on an outro later on as well. So we'll keep you posted on that stuff as well. But again, Aaron, as we were talking earlier. Again, you're with the Texas Rangers fans only Facebook page. You do a lot of graphics and stuff there. But now, I didn't know this until today when we were talking earlier. You're now a contributor to InsideTheDiamonds.com, a website that covers Major League Baseball, kind of all the teams. What's your role there, and how did that get started for you?
One of our moderators in our group writes for that group. She actually covers the
Mm,
Rangers and she covers the Baltimore Orioles.
mm,
So they have different staff writers who cover usually at least a couple different teams. Those happen to be hers, because she's a former transplant from here, but she's living in Maryland now, soon to come back. So she chose those two teams. But she
mm,
had mentioned that they were always looking for new talent. And I was thinking, well, I have some medical advice that I could offer, people who wanting to know a little bit more about what is a rotator cuff tear. What is Max Scherzer dealing with his thumb? Well, it's a median nerve injury from what it sounds like. I don't have that sourced, but it
mm,
sounds like that's what he's going through. Then they came out and talk about giving him injections and his possible disc injuries in his neck and everything. And I'm thinking, yeah, that all lines up. So I could go into some details with that. And if I had
mm,
sources, with Inside the Diamonds or something, it could maybe get me even more information from these
mm.
teams, then I could
Yeah.
get even more in-depth analysis. So that's really my whole angle with it is I will offer them different medical perspectives and kind of explain different injuries that players are having and pitch clock correlation versus causation,
Mhm.
with the injuries we're seeing there, things of that nature.
Yeah, and that's a topic that we've discussed multiple times on the show, especially during our first episode that we had with Terry Bennett, part of L4 Media here, was the pitch clock. Is there any correlation between that and like the rise of Tommy John injuries? Now, I know part of that, probably an argument that we've made, is that just pitchers throw a lot harder now than they have in the past. Do you think that there really is a strong correlation between the implemented pitch clock and the perhaps increase of Tommy John or other arm or shoulder injuries with pitchers across Major League Baseball?
I think there definitely could be,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so easy to speculate, and I don't
Yeah,
want to do that because I want to try to keep it scientific. The
sure.
problem with it is even Neil Elotrosh, the Dodgers surgeon, has come out and said he thinks the pitch clock is contributing to these new rash
Mm-hmm.
of injuries.
Yeah.
The problem with that is he's an expert. I don't take anything away from Dr. Elotrosh, but it's still just an expert opinion because we don't have any scientific data to really support that. And because he's a surgeon doing surgeries on these players, he could be biased. And it could also
Mhm.
be supporting the players, and the
Yeah.
players through their association have already come out and said that they don't like the pitch clock, and they think the injuries are because of the pitch clock. So that's their position. They're letting you know up front, this is what they're thinking. The MLB has contravened that and said, no, we think it's the increase in velocity and spin rate from a young age and how they're
Yeah.
developing and all of this. And they point to data from years ago before there was ever a pitch clock, and data from high school players where there's no pitch clock, to show, no, they're having Tommy John surgery earlier, they're having problems earlier.
Mhm.
All these things were happening before we ever implemented this. And the truth is, no one knows if either of those things are contributing to it or it's just dumb coincidence. So my opinion as an expert one is, chiropractic doctor who does rehab on sports injuries and work comp injuries and all of that,
Mhm.
pre and post surgery. That's all I do every day.
Yeah.
Um, so mine is an expert opinion as well, but it's still just an opinion. I would love to have some clinical trials, some meta-analyses to actually demonstrate one way or another, but we just don't have those.
Yeah, and with the Tommy John injuries, I think a part of youth pitching, whether it's at the high school level or lower or any amateur level of baseball, that there's kind of been an emphasis, whether it's from coaching or from just seeing what these young players see when they watch their favorite major league players play. These guys throw hard now, and a lot of these kids probably feel like they have to throw harder in order just to even have a chance to play at their major league level. So they're dealing with these injuries a lot often. And there's kind of this, stigma or whatever that these young kids, they feel like they have to have Tommy John surgery, maybe early just to quote, get it out of the way, which
And
I think is kind of,
that's also a not to cut you off, but that's also a
yeah,
misconception,
I
because a
agree.
lot of them are being told that, like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm just going to have it early and be done with it, as if it's a one and done thing. No, you can
That's,
re-tear the graft. You
hmm
can have Tommy John multiple times. So to think that you're going to get it at 17, take a year off or 18 months or whatever, recuperate, come back, go into
hmm
the minors, and you're going to be good, that's not necessarily the case. You can still
yeah,
throw out your arm. You can still have other problems. You can have shoulder injuries. Um, but definitely you could re-tear the UCL again
yeah,
or strain it again, or not strain it, but sprain it, because it's ligament sprain. So it is a problem, and it's not something that should be
hmm
thought of kind of as an afterthought by these players. But as Tracy will tell you,
hmm
my co-founder, the founder of Texas Rangers Fans Only, Tracy
hmm
Hawkins, he has a son who's taking a year off right now, not because of Tommy John, but because his elbow and everything was hurting him a little bit. And he
yeah,
just wanted to take some time, and his coach would go, they go around the country playing tournaments and all of that
yes,
sort of thing. So his coach would run him out there on a day for a start, and then try to run him out there on a Sunday to pitch 2 3 more innings.
mm,
um, and all these kids are still trying to throw hard, still trying to throw curveballs. His son has a really great curveball, but then that's even worse on him because you have that snapping effect on the UCL when you bring it over.
hmm
So with that in mind, you don't need to be trying to pitch, 9 innings in a weekend. You don't need to be
yeah,
trying to throw 90 miles an hour at that age. Um, you really need to be learning to pitch into contact and all that sort of thing. But
hmm
is that a direct cause more so than the pitch clock? We really don't know. I don't think that the pitch clock really has anything to do with it
hmm
personally,
yeah,
but that's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth.
yeah. And again, I just don't know if it's you know youth coaching that's trying to beat it in these guys' heads or these young players' heads, that you got to throw hard, you got to throw hard, you got to have a good breaking ball or whatever the case may be, or if it's something that they're seeing their favorite players do when they go watch them play or watch them on TV, or it could be both. Both could be a factor as well. But yeah, it's just again, I don't think there's any correlation with the play clock itself. Again, unless it's directly proven. But I think again, it's something that Terry and I talked about back in episode 2 or episode 3. And we looked at a graphic that I put together to where it's the same amount of injuries of Tommy John that were back in 2019. You know, 4 years before the pitch clock was implemented, and you had guys like Noah Syndergaard and Jacob DeGrom and all these guys that were throwing hard, like upwards of 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And there's still younger guys coming up that are throwing hard like that as well. That could be a potential risk for guys like that. Guys like Paul Skeens, he's made his first 2 career starts, the number 3 overall prospect in baseball and the number 1 pitching prospect in baseball for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He throws hard. And, if it's one of those things to where a year or 2 from now, he's already dealing with elbow injuries and Tommy John early. I don't know if he's had the surgery before. I don't think he has.
I don't think he has, no.
Yeah, but he throws hard. I mean, he throws consistently between 99 and 101, and he's a starting pitcher.
He touched 102 in that first game against the Cubs.
Yeah.
And was it against I don't think his first game was against the Cubs, but in his debut, he touched 102. And then I don't know what he hit against the Cubs the other day.
I know he had upwards of 101, and he had 6. Okay. I think he had 6 no-hit innings.
He had 6 no-hit innings. He struck out 11 with only 1 walk in those 6 innings.
And 11 of those strikeouts. Yeah, he was. And 11 of those strikeouts, 7 of those were the first 7 batters he faced.
Yeah.
Absolutely dominant. Almost a night and day difference from his first major league start where he pitched, I think, only into the 4th or 5th inning, gave up 2 or 3 earned runs. It's kind of a night and day difference. But again, I think nerves come into play, especially when it's your first ever major league career start. Because, again, even if the
Cubs have been in a funk as well lately, hitting the ball. The Cubs have been really, really awesome in pitching, starting pitching.
Yes.
With the exception of Kyle Hendricks, who's probably in his last year, I think, in the majors, the way he's pitching right now.
Mm-hmm.
But Javier Assad and I can't even pronounce his name, Shota Imanaga.
Oh, Shota Imanaga, yeah. He has a sub-1 ERA through
0.84.
It's like 6 or 7 starts? That is ridiculous.
I got the stats here because I was curious. I know that Assad and Imanaga was doing well from what I've seen, but it turns out that Jamison Talon and Ben Brown have also doing well. I mean, Talon's got a 2.2 ERA. Mark Leiter Jr., Jack's cousin, has an ERA of 0.95 in 19 games out of the pen.
Yeah.
And they've also got Hayden Wisniewski, who's 1.91. They got some other kid down here. I can't think of his name. Oh, Hector Neris, the former Astro. 2.65. He's been doing in 18 appearances, so he's been doing awesome. Their pitching is actually pretty good, and their starting pitching, even with taking Shota out of it, has been very good. But they can't hit to save their lives right now. Nico Horner is their best hitting player at 269, and I think they've hit something like 383 or something slugging in the last 10 games. It was some ridiculous stat I read. Yeah. So their problem is a lot like the Rangers, where they have the pitching to keep them in games, but they can't get on. They can't get when they get on. They can't get the runners in. They're not scoring a lot, so they're not advancing. Even though their record should actually be probably better, kind of like the Rangers should be better, but we're just not scoring runs.
Yeah, and with this latest series for the Rangers, they dropped 2 of 3 at home against the last place in the AL West Angels, led by Ron Washington. It was Ron Washington's first ever series back in Arlington as a manager since the 2014 season when he was the manager of the Rangers. He takes 2 of 3 from his former club. And again, huge part of that was just the offensive inconsistencies. Now, we were talking about the injuries. Now there's more players coming back in from injuries. And the first of those 13 players that were on the injury list returned on Sunday afternoon. Evan Carter, but he went 0 for 4 in his first game back. I think it'd been a couple weeks or maybe a week and a half since he last played. I think he last played during the Colorado series.
Yeah.
And where they got swept again. And that's another thing that happened since the last time we recorded Texas team.
He was dinged in that series, right? Didn't he played in that last game where they won in Oakland on the doubleheader.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And then I think he got dinged some point over that weekend in Colorado, and they let him take a break and said he was day-to-day, and then he didn't play against Cleveland or the first part of this Angels series. So it's been about a week, a little bit more than a week. And I knew that he wouldn't play Friday or Saturday because they had lefties going on the mound, and for whatever reason, they will not let him hit left-handed pitching. I don't like that. I think give the kid a try.
Yeah.
But he does have problems, obviously, hitting left-handed pitching. So if you're already having some injuries, well, you're not going to roll him out in the starting lineup on a day you're facing a left-hander.
Yeah, and I think,
So
and again, that's an analytics point of view. I think in this case, it'd be an exception when you've been gone for about a week and a half. Although he may be statistically not as good against left-handed pitching as he is to right-handed pitching. When you're out for almost 2 weeks, I think any at bat you can get to kind of just try to get back in the groove or just get more ABs so you can get back
well,
in the groove
he did
quicker.
have a pinch hit at bat last night.
Okay.
So that was kind of his
Mm.
introduction to get back into it. But with that one and 0 for today, I think he's 0 for 5.
Mhm.
This weekend. So he's still not hitting well, but we'll just have to kind of see how he does as they slow roll him back. I expect him to
Mhm.
play more against the Phillies.
Yeah, I think so as well. But again, the offense overall just has struggled, and they haven't really been, up nowhere near up to the level that we saw last season. Injuries definitely play a role in that, I think. Again, Josh Young, but I think he's on a fast track. I'm not sure exactly when he'll return, but I think they're even with the setback because they initially thought he was hurt and that hurt one way, and then end up he's more hurt than they initially thought. But now it seems like rehab is going well for him so far, so he could be eyeing more of an early July or late June return more so than a late July return, which is good news
Right.
for the Rangers. He's just got to stay consistent in the rehab there. But again, we talked earlier with Max Scherzer, he was moved to the 60-day IL, but I think we were talking about it. That's retroactive back to opening day, so it's not
Yes.
retroactive to whenever he was supposed to come back or anything. It's retroactive to opening day, which means he's still, if he's able to physically, he's still on track to return possibly in late May or early June, if he can.
Initially, he was pegged to be mid-June anyway.
Yeah.
So if you don't get him back until mid-June, it's already just kind of, well, okay, that's when we were expecting to get him back anyway, so no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
However, you would like to have him back and pitching at a high quality level
Mhm.
before then. But with the starting pitching doing okay right now, I'm not
Mhm.
trying to rush back Max Scherzer because
Yeah.
we don't honestly need him except to maybe move Heaney back into the bullpen as a
Yeah.
long reliever. Particularly if Dunning comes back and he's on pace
Mhm.
to do that as well. He took bullpen, was it
Mhm.
this morning or yesterday, I think?
Yeah, and then they had one of their
He and
prospects.
Eovaldi.
Yeah, and then one of their top pitching prospects, Kumar Rocker, he was
Yes.
teammates with Jack Leiter over at Vanderbilt. He took a bullpen session at Globe Life Field Saturday prior to the game 2 of that Angels series, the one game that the Rangers won in this 3-game series. So who knows?
And Tyler Molly did a bullpen session with
Yep.
him at that same time.
And he's yet to make his Rangers debut. And then Nathan Eovaldi, I think he's slated to come back in late May as well. And then when you look at, but like you said, with the pitching still there, John Gray, he's been dang near unhittable over the last couple starts. So he's been phenomenal. So the pitching is doing enough. The starting pitching, that is doing enough to keep the team in each game. But again, it's just the offensive inconsistencies that's hurt this team the most as we head into June, halfway through May. June is just right around the corner. So, but we're expecting a lot of these guys to come back, hopefully sooner rather than later, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I know that Bradford got some bad news that he's not healing like he anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
So I would expect that 60-day goes out to even further
Mm-hmm.
before he's able to come back. And then depending on who's back at that time, he may be in the starting rotation. He may not be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to be a season-ending injury. I mean, fractured ribs heal in
Yeah.
4 to 6 weeks, like we were talking about on the last podcast.
Yeah.
But it does affect your back muscles and your mechanics and all of that sort of thing. So for whatever reason, it's just not healing like it should. Then you can't rush him out there and make another injury or make the injury worse or make another injury because you're trying to do too much too fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I would expect him to be probably out until July.
Yeah,
at
and
this point.
we're probably not going to see this team fully healthy, if at all, probably until August.
Probably.
And that's even if that's going to happen. And that's just if everything falls into place. if this team can kind of tread water and try to stay as competitive as they can, like we talked about, before we started recording, they're only one game out on the American League wild card. I think if they can stay competitive and stay within, at least 2 or 3 games of that wild card spot, and try to get on a hot streak, every once in a while, because you can't, if they play as consistently poor as they have lately, then they're come August, whether they're healthy or not, there might be too much damage as far as the standings go to where they can even make a wild card, come October.
That's my biggest concern is, can
Mm-hmm.
they tread water long enough, because the injuries keep piling up. The hitting, no one understands why. I mean, even Bochy's come out and said, yeah, we're in a funk and we're trying to address it. I don't know what the issue is. I don't guess he knows. They're just not hitting, and that's how baseball goes sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you consistently don't hit for another month or so, then you might find yourself far enough out that getting on a heater in August and September will be a difficult challenge to try to get back into the playoff race, even if you have healthy bodies back. And I'm really at this point telling all Rangers fans, don't expect them to be healthy this season.
No, again, and like we just said, it'll be August before they could even be 80% healthy, if that, and that's just if everything falls into place. But offensively, it might just be a funk, and it's something that they definitely have the bats to hit out of it. They still have Marcus Semien, they still have Corey Seager, they still have Nathaniel Lowe, Jonah Heim, now Evan Carter's back, and heck, they even re-signed Robbie Grossman. They brought him back. He started as the DH in Sunday afternoon's game. We'll see if he can fit back in. I mean, he wasn't. I mean, he was a a contributor, kind of in a utility role for this team last year. So, but I think they brought him back kind of as a depth piece after Wyatt Langford went out, because they needed kind of someone just to fill in that designated hitter role. But it's just the offense. I think it's just simply like you and like Bush Bochy said, they're just in a funk. And I think it's something that, with the amount of star power offensively that they still have, again with Semien, Seager, Heim, and even Josh Smith, again filling in that role for Josh Young, he's still been hitting good. He went 2 for 4 today, and it's just one of those things where baseball's kind of ebb and flow. You're going to have cold streaks and you're going to have hot streaks. And I think, despite the injuries, the fact that they still have the hitters, healthy and active that they do have, I think they'll hit out of this funk before too long. But again, I think it's just a matter of treading water and just trying to stay competitive and in the hunt for a wild card spot until you can get as healthy as you possibly can. And when that is, who knows? I think at the very earliest, again, it'll be early August or late July if they're lucky. And that's just with everything falling into place.
Yeah, because going into the season, they let Robbie Grossman walk because they had Foskey, they had Langford, they have other options. They even still have Dustin Harris on the 40-man, in an emergency situation. They had Ornelas they can call up. They did call him up for a couple games. They have Sam Huff, who can DH or be the backup catcher. God forbid there's an injury to Heim, but if there is something like that, they have options in terms of position players. They don't have options in terms of pitching.
Yeah.
And that's been the problem, is our bullpen pitching is thin, and we can't seem to get it together at the same time as our starting pitching and the hitting. I don't know how deep you want to go into this, but I was telling somebody the other day about essentially the 5 elements of a good baseball team, and now you have to have at least 3 of 5 to really tread water and be in contention, and then try to get hot, down the stretch. And right now the Rangers are not doing that. You have starting pitching is one, and you have bullpen pitching, and you can kind of break these down even more if you wanted to. Bullpen pitching really comes along a lot on the manager because of obviously situational baseball there. So you could throw the management into that, especially. Then you have overall hitting. We're just hitting a solo home run. How you doing when you're up by 8 and you're just out there swinging away. But then you also have situational hitting, which is number 4, which is the most important part of all of it, truthfully. And that also has a little bit to do with the manager, pinch hitting and things like that, some gamesmanship. And then the 5th one is fielding. Well, outside of starting pitching, tell me where we're dominant in any of those. you
Mm.
know.
It's just not really any of them, honestly. I mean, I was reading the stat about Adolis Garcia in right field. I think he's in like the bottom 5 or bottom third, and as right fielders in the league for defensive. I can't remember what the exact stat was, but he was like bottom 5 or bottom 3 in like 3 defensive categories when it comes to outfielders. Again, he does have a phenomenal arm out there in
Does.
right field, and
And
he
he
really,
just won a Gold Glove last season, so we know
yeah.
he can play
So,
the field.
but I think again that just goes back to this whole team just being in a funk right now. Again, most of that is offensively, but again, it kind of can wear on a team mentally when it just doesn't seem like anything's going right. Whether it's the health of the team or situational hitting, all the things you mentioned, but it just kind of seems to have a ripple effect. If you're missing a lot of these guys and a lot of these things are happening. You're not hitting with runners on, or you're having trouble getting runners on. I mean, they only had like 5 hits all game, and the pitcher that pitched for the Angels today, what was his name? I think it was Soriano.
Soriano.
He pitched 7 2/3 today. He pitched with 2 outs left in the 8th inning, only gave up 5 hits and 1 run. And that's a pitcher who came in the game 2-4 with a barely sub-4 ERA. So not great, but it's one of those things to where when you get pitching matchups like that, you got to be able to take advantage and just get people on base. But only 5 hits through 8 innings against a pitcher with that kind of stat line, it's just a prime example of where this team is offensively right now.
Yeah, and 1 for 6 again with runners in scoring position. I think they left 5 or 6 something on base again. So it's feast or famine. They're scoring 15 runs and doing phenomenally, or they're not scoring anything. So over the aggregate, it looks pretty good. We're actually still hitting 300 with runners in scoring position, which is kind of amazing considering our team average is like 245 or something. But that kind of belies the truth again, where we have a couple key positions where Heim and Simeon and others have come through and we're batting really well. But with the bases loaded, we're batting about 220.
Yeah.
So we also, in the 7th inning as a whole, we're batting 188 on the season right now. And 5th through 7th, it's about the Mendoza line. When you get to 8th and 9th, it's a little bit better, but when we're trailing by a lot, it dips off again.
Yeah.
So situationally, if you look at the advanced metrics, we're not hitting in the clutch, and we're not hitting consistently, and that's where we're losing these close games because our pitching is keeping us in it. Our bullpen lets it go here and there. Hernandez didn't have a good game today. Came in and gave up those runs, but you're getting these games where it's 1-2 nothing. The stars are coming out after 6-7 innings, giving up only 2 or 3 runs or fewer, and you can't play but 1 or 2 yourself, and you're losing these close ball games that you should be winning because you're just not getting runs across, doing the small things that you need to do to move the runners and all of that. I was I mean, not lovely, but I was joyed to see Adolis had. Was it Adolis? I think was yesterday had the sack fly. Maybe not. Maybe it was
I mean,
low. I can't
I
remember.
think on Saturday he had the game tying home run in the 6th or 7th, whenever it was.
Somebody else had a sack fly, and I was glad to see that because that's the kind of ball that we need to be playing.
Yes.
This moving runners over and everything, not be trying to swing for the fences every time we get
Yes.
runners in scoring position. But that's been our real problem, and I have it here somewhere and I can't find it. But I remember that to start the season, we were not only first in run score, hitting with runners in scoring position, way out ahead of Philadelphia. We're still first, but we were like 4th or something in overall team hitting at about 260. We've dipped all the way back to 9th in this funk over about a week and a half or so. And in that same time, we've dipped back in ERA to 18th in the league.
Yeah.
And we've dipped back in fielding to tied for 10th or 11th. So we're almost out of the top 10 in fielding. So when I talk about the 5 components, we're average to below average in at least a couple of them.
Yeah.
And maybe average to slightly above average in the other 2. So really it's only starting pitching where we've been pretty good for most of the season, if not really good at times.
Yeah.
Well, 1 out of 5 is not going to get you anything. If you're good at one and average at a couple others. You're kind of about 3 out of 5, kind of average. Well, you're going to be an average team, and that's exactly what they are. They're 24 and 24.
Yeah.
They're exactly average.
Yeah, but with everything that's going on, you know, still being only as going into Sunday at least only one game out of the wild card spot, and still second year division at 500 with everything that's going on, I think all things considered, you're probably in a much better spot than you would be otherwise with all these particular circumstances coming down on your team. But again, there's got to be a point where offensively they got to get out of this funk and start hitting again. And I think that'll kind of slowly start to happen. Again, it's baseball. It's a 162 game season. There's going to be cold streaks. There's going to be hot streaks. And I think they're very much due for a hot streak right now. Again, like you were saying, going into that Cleveland series, they were number one in the American League in 3 statistical categories, despite everything that had been going on. And now they have dropped since then. And like you said, but it's just, they just got to get out of it. They just got to get out of it because going in during Sunday afternoon's game, they were leading 1-0 going into the 7th. Michael Lorenzen, who had a great performance today, 6 2/3, only gave up 2 earned runs.
We're a little concerned about the walks, right?
Yeah.
They are walking a lot more people this year. It seems. Yeah. I don't have that stat, but they certainly don't have the command that they seem like they had, that last postseason, let's say.
Yeah, and with Lorenzen, I think he had 3 walks today to 6 strikeouts. Again, from your starting pitching, walks are going to happen. But 3 walks, that's something that we've kind of consistently seen. If there has been one thing that this Rangers starting rotation that they currently have right now, the one thing that's kind of been an issue, and might just be with the pitching overall, has been free bases. That's something that we've seen from the beginning. When you look back at the Chicago Cubs series, the opening series at home, Jose Leclerc in his first appearance of the season walked the first 3 batters he saw. And that's kind of been something that we've seen all season long. And it really, no matter who's been in there, it's been an issue. But it's like you said, that's just the way baseball goes. It can happen. But I think for the most part, they've been able to defensively get out of that for the most part. It's just once you get out of that and the bats come on, they're just struggling bringing people across the plate. But I think they're still in a fine spot. They're obviously coming off a World Series run that they had last year. Just the offensive outburst, one top 3 offense in all of baseball last year. Coming off such a phenomenal season like that, it seems like anything less than that might be a disappointment, which it might be for most fans. This team offensively hasn't been anywhere near what they were last year, and there's a lot of factors that have gone into that. But it's just, I think it's something that they'll mold together at some point, whether it's when a lot of these injured guys come back or when they just start seeing the ball well with the long season again. But I think they're fine. I think with all things considered, they could be in a much worse spot than they are right now. I think they'll continue to tread water but the one thing they're going to have to do is just catch a hot streak. And we've said it multiple times, but I think offensively, that's what you got to do. Because if the pitching stays as consistent, especially starting pitching or that they have the last couple weeks, if they can keep you in games, there's going to be a point where we're going to start bringing guys across the board and start winning these closer games. And I think we saw a little bit of that on Saturday afternoon. They were down 1-0. I think it was in the 7th when Adolis Garcia hit that game-tying home run. Then the game ended up going to the 13th inning, and they won. They got the bases loaded, and then the game-winning run came in when Nathaniel Lowe, I don't remember if he got hit or if it was a walk.
He got hit.
He got hit. So,
with the bases loaded.
Exactly. And then when stuff like that happens, it's kind of one of those things where when you're in a funk, you kind of need wins like that. Or it just kind of seems like, well, you got to win some way. And just in a crazy way like that, winning on a hit by pitch in the 13th inning with the bases loaded, it's just one of those things where you need a win like that, which can kind of maybe start pressing you towards, offensively trying to get back into the groove that we kind of saw this team had last year.
Yeah, I agree. It's really difficult to have any sort of hot take
Mhm.
in May.
Yeah.
People need to settle down.
Exactly. I agree.
The MLB has prioritized, like the NBA has, and to a certain degree hockey, but specifically the NBA and the MLB have prioritized their postseasons.
Hmm.
Um, so, and it's going to be even worse when they expand to having more teams in the postseason soon.
Hmm.
So you're playing 162 games, and you're really just doing that to try to get hot at the end for 1 month.
Yeah.
So in doing that, you don't even really your season doesn't even really begin until after the All-Star game. You
Yeah.
have to tread water through July, and then the last 2 months of the season in modern baseball are what you need to really focus on. You need to be there, to be in contention, but then you have essentially a 2 month run and then a sprint at the end in the postseason.
Yeah.
Well, that then takes away 4 months of the season that you're playing, that you're playing in, and the games matter. You can't be losing and out of it by July, but it also doesn't matter that much because of the streaky nature of the game and because
Yeah.
it's so many games over such a long season.
Hmm.
So anybody can get hot, win 20 out of 30 games in a month or 2 months in a row and
Hmm.
go from last to first.
Yeah.
So, you know, all this negativity in these groups and things that I'm seeing in May is just ridiculous. But I
Hmm.
understand it's because it's a lot of it's older fans. A lot haven't
Yeah.
really come around yet to understand that the game is not like it was when they were watching as a kid, where you
Hmm.
had to win every game and every game counted because there
Hmm.
were only two teams in the playoffs or only four
Yeah.
teams in the playoffs. Well, that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. And I think the World Series hangover kind of comes into play from a fan's perspective as well, because you're coming off that season where they were, you know, phenomenal in every aspect of the game, and that's a good point. Like you just said, kind of that sprint towards the end of the season, getting hot at the right time, right before playoffs and going into the playoffs. That's the story of the Rangers postseason run last year.
Yeah.
Everything clicked at the perfect time, and they were able to go into Tampa Bay and
The Cubs did that and won their first one in 108 years.
yeah, yeah. And
You
then the
know,
same thing on the other side with the Diamondbacks. They got hot
yeah,
at the right time, and they ran through the playoffs against two teams they had no business beating.
right.
So
No one would ever said that the Diamondbacks were better than the Phillies or the Braves or the Dodgers.
yeah, and
The
it's
best, they were the fourth best team in the National League last season.
as crazy as it sounds. Very rarely, especially with how the playoffs are or how they're set up, very rarely does the best team in baseball win the World Series.
Yeah,
It's
that's something they actually need to address, in my opinion.
So sorry about the technical difficulties there, everyone. But like we were saying, very rarely does the best team in baseball win the postseason. It's always more about getting hot at the right time. And again, even on the American League side, I don't think the Rangers were the best team overall going into the playoffs last year.
I think
And
they were in the first part of the season. You can make an argument
well,
that
yeah.
they were,
Hmm.
but after August and September, no one was saying, "Oh yeah,
Hmm.
the Rangers, they're definitely going to do something with that horrendous
Hmm.
bullpen." Like no
Yeah.
one, not even Rangers fans were saying that. We're all just like,
Mhm.
"Well, if we win a series, that would be great."
Yeah.
You know,
Because going into last season,
because we blew 33 saves. I mean, come on, it was a
Mhm.
historically awful bullpen, so no one
Yes,
was legitimately thinking that we could do what we did. And
offensively, yeah.
yeah, well, even pitching wise, that the bullpen
Mhm.
and everything would step up to be not the weak spot during the playoffs. So you don't know. You just have to hang around.
Mhm.
I don't know about your opinion on this. I'd like to hear it, but I do hate that this is how the game has come to in the modern times, because I don't want to necessarily see fewer teams in the playoffs. I think it would actually be better to have like 6 teams in the playoffs, or I don't know if 8, that's probably too many, but have it more structured like the NBA and NHL, where you do have full 7 game series, or at least 5 game series at the front end, not this
Mhm.
3 game series nonsense in the
Mhm.
wild card. If you have to knock out 10 games, go back to 154 game schedule or something like that, you make alterations how you need to. But do that, maybe
Mhm.
give like the top um, 2 teams the first series off or something like the NFL does. There's a rust factor. You can play around with it, right?
Mhm.
But I think that's great for fans, because you have more options for the fans who follow these
Mhm.
teams who are not usually in it to have an opportunity to have championships and have them engaged.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to have your best teams, who are consistently the best team all season, not have a win, and then
Mm.
people look into it like, well, how in the hell did the 110 win Dodgers or whatever not have
Yeah.
at least the World Series appearance out of that? That's asinine, right? You can't even
Mm.
compute that, especially since these old heads would say, well, when I was a kid, they would be the only team in the playoffs with the other team right behind them.
Mhm.
All these other teams wouldn't even the Rangers wouldn't have been in the playoffs last year.
Mm.
So you don't want to marginalize the whole regular season, which is what they've kind of done. But at the
Yeah.
same time, you do want to have the postseason mean something, and you do want to have the
Mhm.
fans engaged. You want someone like a Pittsburgh, with their
Yeah.
Paul Skeens, who's
Mhm.
not been good for years, to have a chance to sneak
The up
into
and
the.
coming teams.
Yeah,
Exactly. I agree.
exactly. So I don't know what Manfred's going to do about that. Well, what the owners are going to do about that, but they do need to address that, at least with the next CBA and moving
Mhm.
forward when he leaves and they get a new commissioner. They need to look at that for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's like it goes back to what we were saying earlier, how not just Major League Baseball, but all the major sports leagues, at least in the United States, have kind of started to prioritize their postseason coverage, and that's what they've all done with extending the playoffs by implementing more teams and more lower seeds just to expand the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that goes back to the sports networks as well. The money, because
Even MLS does that. There's
mhm,
only like, I think 15 teams, right? And
yeah.
8 of them will make the playoffs in each
Mhm.
conference. So Dallas got in last year in the 8th seed, and
Mhm.
they weren't a good team. They really had no business being in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But it happens. It was good for us. You got to go see playoff, soccer
Mhm.
here in Frisco. But truthfully, they didn't belong, and
Mhm.
you want to have the best of the best competing at that point in the season.
Yeah. And but that's another thing. It seems like the sports networks that covers the games kind of dictate, not they don't directly dictate it, but they at least talk with the commissioners and the owners of these sports leagues and be like, hey, you expand the playoffs, that's more coverage, that's more money for you, that's more money for us, it's a win-win. And I think just the expanded coverage of all these postseasons for every sport, there the more games and then the more coverage, the more games that mean something, whether it involves a team that has any business being in the playoffs or not. I think the money again is just the ultimate factor for the expansion
It
of all
is.
these playoffs. I think with the Rangers, they were the 5 seed going into the playoffs, and they're only the second 5 seed since the first playoff expansion to win the World Series. So that's a rare case of a lower seed that maybe in the past wouldn't have even been had a playoff appearance, ends up getting hot and going all the way. So I mean, in some cases it could be good, in some cases it could not. I think it's just at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's up to your personal preference. Me personally, I don't mind it, especially in baseball. I think the top 6 seeds or top 8 seeds, whatever they're doing, I think it's fine. But again, if it expands even more to where you're adding 4 new teams or 2 new teams in each conference or each league, American League and National League, that might they might have a chance, but you're just implementing them just to have more postseason coverage, and then they end up getting swept every year. Then at that point, it's kind of like, why even
Right.
bother?
Right. It's kind of like the playing in the NBA. It's good for the
Exactly.
fans of those teams, but not
Yeah.
really for the league. It's just a money grab. You
Exactly.
know, you, there's very rarely is an 8 going to beat a 1.
Hmm.
So you don't need so many teams that it waters down your product.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we know what the bourgeois uh, history of the MLB owners is.
Hmm.
So they're always going to be for a money grab. That money
Yeah.
grab is why precisely right now that Rangers fans are having to have Apple TV and Bally Sports and all these different things to try to
Yeah.
stream the games instead of it just being one platform or being
Mhm.
offered through MLB with no blackouts,
Yeah.
because you get these side deals on the cable rights, and the rights deals and everything are paying for most of it. They're not really making all their money from concession sales and ticket sales and parking and all of this.
Hmm.
That just sort of covers operating costs and gives a little bit
Yeah.
to the players and stuff. It's the TV rights deals that make the money, the
Hmm.
advertising.
Yep.
And so they're not going to take less money and play fewer games
Hmm.
that would hit their pocketbook, because that's what they actually care about. It's a business, right? So
Yeah.
from their perspective, that's what they want. But from the fans' perspective, it's a pain in the ass, and it will actually drive fans away to
Yeah.
some extent. At least the casual fans, and drive them to illegal platforms for streaming and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So they do need to look at it and have a little bit more of a fine-tuned approach,
Hmm.
see what they're looking for with that. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and if they're making money, they're going to keep doing what makes money.
And that's exactly right. And again, not just Major League Baseball, but every sports league is probably taking the same approach. But I think from a fan's perspective, if you're a neutral, you could probably take it or leave it. But if say you're an eighth seed in the NBA, I think the Lakers were an eight seed going to this playoffs, or seven or eight seed. A team that was kind of hit and miss in the regular season. They're just squeaking their way in the playoffs. If you're a Lakers fan, obviously you're going to love that. Despite everything that happened, you're still in the playoffs. You still have a chance to at
Yeah.
least have an impact in the playoffs and try to make it to the finals. But again, the lower the seed, obviously, the harder it's going to be, because that's just how the seeding lines up. And
Yeah, and
but
in the Lakers' case, it was horrible that they finished
yeah,
seventh. They would have been better
yeah,
off to try to finish eighth if they could have,
yeah,
because finishing seventh, you drew Denver, who's owned your
mhm,
ass
yep,
the last 2 years.
yep,
I think they won what, like 11, 12 in a row before the
hmm,
Lakers pulled out that one win. So
hmm,
yeah, I mean that was just a bad deal for the Lakers. No, your overall point is valid, and
hmm.
I don't know if it's going to change anytime soon. My guess would be no.
No, because another thing that's worth talking about, there's talk about league expansion in baseball in the next
Yes.
5 to 10 years. They're talking about bringing a team to Salt Lake City and to Nashville, and of course the A's. I mean, it's not an expansion, but they're going to be moving to Vegas soon.
Mhm.
And but for example, for Salt Lake, they already have a AAA affiliate there, the Salt Lake Bees. I think they're an affiliate of the Padres, maybe, or the A's. I'm
Not,
not sure.
not
Uh,
sure.
But the Bees are a AAA affiliate to a major league club. Does the Salt Lake Bees just get upgraded to a major league team, or do they just implement a new team and there's just a Salt Lake City team and then the Salt Lake Bees still? I don't know how they plan on it, but I know that Salt Lake and Nashville, and the Nashville, they have the Sounds too. They have a local
Yeah.
baseball club as well. So is it one of those things to where you just automatically promote this AAA, or I think Nashville's like a high A or a single A maybe? And do they just automatically get upgraded to a major league club, get a new stadium and all that, or what? I mean, I think.
I haven't heard Manfred speak to that. I
Hmm.
feel like in the case of the bees, that would
Hmm.
actually work. You could
Yeah.
just say, well, look, we're going to take this AAA affiliate away. We're going to build a new team,
Hmm.
and we're going to move the AAA affiliate to somewhere else so that it's
Yeah.
not competing in the local market. If it's a single A team in Nashville, I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. If it's a high A or even a double A team like
You could
Frisco
probably
here,
leave it as
yeah, you
is.
can just leave it as it is.
Yeah.
Nashville's a huge market.
Yeah, but Salt Lake City is one of those growing, sports cities. They have the Utah Jazz,
But have you
obviously,
been
and
to
then
Salt Lake City?
I've not.
Okay, it's not large.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a growing sports city because of the people that live there like the sports, but it's
Hmm.
not a huge metropolitan area.
Well, yeah, yeah, for sure. But then you look at, the Arizona Coyotes, the hockey team. They're getting moved to Salt Lake City, or they're
Hmm.
getting moved to Utah. I haven't seen what their new mascot or what they're changing the franchise to. Are they just going to be the Salt Lake City Coyotes or something? I'm not sure what they're going to
No,
do.
they're
But
changing. They're changing the name, but I don't think it's been announced exactly what they're going to do with
yeah,
it.
but they're moving to, if with this NHL team, the Coyotes, Arizona Coyotes, the
But
franchise being moved to Salt
that
Lake
wasn't
City.
because of anything that was going on in Phoenix,
Yeah,
because Arizona is actually a huge hockey state. They have a lot
yeah,
of people in Arizona who like hockey, which is weird, being in the desert, but it is.
mhm,
And they have a lot of good player development there. So that has something more to do with the franchise. I don't
mhm,
know the exact
yeah.
details,
Something
but
about
I
the
would,
ownership, because I know
yeah,
the fans,
when the
fans
NHL
were.
expands, I guarantee they'll go right back to Tucson or somewhere and put another
Oh,
team there.
yeah, no doubt. But with Salt Lake City being growing, uh, again, metropolitan area, not a huge city, but growing. And if the fan response is really, I mean, they're already good with the Jazz. They have a very good and consistently showing up fan base. If the same things with the hockey team, and
their soccer
Major League
team is good
Baseball
too.
sees that with this new hockey team, like, okay, this team, this is a really big sports city or sports state. They show out for this NHL team. They show out for the Jazz. Why not expand the Bees and make them the official Major League team whenever we do decide to expand? I think that's something. I know it's something. At the end of the day, it's just rumors. Nothing's been solidified, but I've heard, through the grapevine or whatever, that Salt Lake City is one of the target cities for expansion whenever Major League Baseball elects to do so.
Manfred actually mentioned a few cities that were on the list.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that in front of me. I know Nashville and Salt Lake City were, for people, seemed like the two most obvious choices.
Yes.
But there were others on that list as well. I think Portland was one.
Yeah, we got Portland.
Going back to Montreal was one.
So here's the list. And this is in alphabetical order. You got Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
Then Las Vegas, which is going to be the A's.
A's, right.
Montreal, Canada.
Yeah.
Nashville, Tennessee. Portland, like you said. Then Sacramento, Salt Lake City, and San Antonio.
San Antonio. I forgot about San Antonio. Yeah.
So, and the San Antonio, they have a AAA affiliate, or the Mission's AA.
They're AA, I believe.
They're AA. Okay, so that's something where the Missions could be. I think AA is enough to where it's already an established team in San Antonio, even though they're just an affiliate of the Astros. Are the San Antonio? Are they the Astros? I'm gonna look that up.
I'm looking up right now. I'm pretty sure they're the Astros.
That's what I thought too. I know that their AAA is the AAA Sugarland. I know that. But I think
look it up here.
I think San Antonio is the Astros affiliate. But either way, San Antonio is on the list for Major League expansion teams. And honestly, I think
they are a AA team.
Okay, so that's very possible. But I think as far as this list of teams in particular goes,
so they probably wouldn't be a. Sorry to cut you off. They probably wouldn't be Astros then, because the Corpus Christi Hooks are the Astros AA affiliate.
Okay, so the Missions
beat the Hooks 3-1 today. So I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure because I'm not in San Antonio, but yeah, they are a AA team.
They're the AA affiliate of the San Diego Padres. So,
Padres, okay.
And that's what I was thinking. Salt Lake City was the AAA, and they very well could be, but San Antonio is a AA affiliate of the Padres. But honestly, I think of those teams listed, obviously, putting Las Vegas out because that's not really an expansion; that's just a franchise moving there. I think Nashville or Salt Lake City probably more so than Nashville. But I wouldn't be opposed to seeing another Canadian team in Montreal. I think that'd be pretty cool. Have kind of like a in-country rivalry with the Blue Jays there.
And they did at the time.
Because they used to, they used to be the Expos, so bring the Expos back. So
I don't know if you remember, did they move to Washington before you were born or after? I don't.
Montreal, I think they moved to Washington, and I think 2002 was their first season, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. Weren't you born in like 2000?
2000. I was born in 2000. Montreal. They left. They left in 2004, actually.
2004. Okay. So you don't remember watching the Montreal live?
No, I do not.
The Montreal team had some really good fans, and during the 90s, they had some really good teams and fun teams. That 94 season will always be part of like what could have happened,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The problem with that is it was kind of like when they were bad, they were really bad, and the fans were only marginally there, kind of like they are in Tampa Bay. But when they were good, they actually had some fans, right? And you could have some fans from Buffalo that could come over and kind of watch them as well, if they wanted to. What happened with Montreal that would be the same problem that they have now, and probably why they don't get a team, is not because they don't have a fan base that they could appeal to and a large enough metropolitan area to support it. It's because of a TV rights deal that was in place. It started showing Blue Jays games in Quebec. back
Yeah.
in the day, and that made a lot of fans go over to the Blue Jays, who were a much better team. It obviously just
Yeah.
won the World Series 2 years in
Mhm.
a row. Had better players, even the '80s with Kelly Gruber and a bunch of guys. They had better teams, more exciting teams. They
Yeah.
also had the Sky Dome, which was a really cool stadium to watch a baseball game in. So fans would go and travel to Ontario to watch the games, and they would watch the Blue Jays games on TV,
Mhm.
and the Expos were being marginalized, and they weren't having a proper share of the rights deal, so they weren't getting enough money to really support it. So when Montreal wouldn't come along and give the new stadium and work with the team, the owner was just like, "Well, bump you. I'm going to
Mhm.
Washington D.C." And that's what happened. And D.C. has been, more supportive of the Nationals. So could the Expos actually have a team and support it? Yeah, but would it make financial sense? Probably not. So I would
Mhm.
very much doubt that you see a Montreal team, even though a lot of people are wanting it for nostalgia purposes. I would like it for nostalgia purposes. I
Yeah,
really
for
like
sure.
their uniforms,
It's
but
like with the NBA. If they talk about expansions, everyone's wanting them to bring back the Seattle SuperSonics.
yeah, because in my opinion, they should have never left,
I
right?
agree.
No offense to the Thunder, it's a great
Mhm.
organization, but Seattle, that wasn't because the fans weren't awesome or they didn't have great teams. It's began because of ownership and the conflict with
Mhm.
the city.
Mhm.
So, but that's a market that could absolutely support it because of the situation with the rights deals and everything. I don't know how MLB supports it in Quebec, but it would be nice if they could figure it out.
Yeah, and with this original Expos franchise, that's actually something I forgot to mention it in the open of the show. But next week, for episode 8 of Texas Two Scene, we'll actually have it live once again, and it'll be our first baseball look back. Now on Outdrink the Coverage, Terry and Noe, they have a bunch of look backs when it comes to football and the Dallas Cowboys. But this will be kind of our
Yeah.
first one dipping our toe into the baseball world, where we're going to be talking about the MLB strike from 1994 into the 95 season. And I think the Expos, I mean, of course, obviously I didn't live through that time, but I think the Expos were one of the top teams
They
that
were
were
the
like,
top team that year.
yeah, the top team. And they were the World Series favorites going into that season. If the strike never happened, they were probably like, oh, well, this would have been the team that would have won it all. And another question that would rise from that was if they won that World Series, would that have kind of sent a ripple effect, like in the timeline, to where they never would have left Montreal? Who knows? That's something we'll discuss more next week.
Yeah, it's hard to
But
say.
you never
Because
know. It's all
everything I was
hypothetical.
talking about was happening regardless of whether they won or not.
Hmm.
So financially, it still didn't make any sense,
Of course.
But that's the problem with baseball is you just never know.
Yeah, exactly. But that's gonna be a fun deal. Next week for episode 8, we'll have it live. It'll be myself, Terry, and Noe. Of course, I'll be relying kind of heavily on them because they actually lived through the strike. But I'll be doing as much research as I can to kind of lay out the timeline and kind of ride the ship or drive the ship on the when we have the show next week. But I'll be relying on them heavily because they have firsthand accounts, and I'm sure you'll be there in the chat as well,
Mhm.
giving your memories that you remember from that time because you're a lifelong baseball fan. You lived through that, and you might have your own feelings about that thing, about the strike itself. But it's one of those crazy things. I mean, when you look at I think it was the opening of the 2022 season where there was a huge delay because there was that conflict between the Players Association and then the MLB front office because the 2022 season was delayed for a while as well, and that was kind of the first time that had happened since this 1994-1995 strike. So that'll be really fun to talk about next week. But I mean,
Yeah,
just
and you
I
can
guess
even
kind of briefly, what do you remember about that strike, and what were your feelings on it?
before I get to that, you could even reference kind of what's going to happen in 2026 because
Yeah.
a lot of experts are saying that with that next CBA that there's
Hmm.
going to be a huge potential for a lockout again.
Hmm.
So read into that as well because you might in your lifetime within the next 2 years be
See
seeing
one
another
similar.
strike.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I hope to God not because baseball's in a great place now coming back with the rules
Yes.
changes. You would just doom the sport almost if you go through that again. Um, and that's because in 94, 95, it took 1998 to really bring fans fully back to the stadium.
Yeah.
People complain about the steroids era now, but at the time, no one gave a damn. We were
Yeah.
all about it. It was fun. We kind of all knew, like, yeah, these guys aren't, come on. It's not juice baseballs like you're trying to tell us that it is, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I saw Mark McGuire play with the Athletics before he came over to St. Louis.
Hmm.
Okay, I knew what Mark McGuire looked like when he started in the league, and then I saw what he looked like in St. Louis. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
Um, and then same thing with Bonds. I was tracking Bonds in '93 with his first year with San Francisco after he
Hmm.
came over from Pittsburgh, and he was still skinny. He still looked like Pittsburgh Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
He was amazing. But by 2000, he didn't even look like himself anymore.
Hmm.
But fans didn't care because it was fun. And then when all of that went down,
Hmm.
that couple that with other things going on in the sport, then ushers in the era that we had in the 20 teens of strikeout or homers,
Hmm.
everything's, all or nothing, and fans kind of checked out.
Yeah.
But 94, 95
It
was,
was the longest,
was,
lockout because it
and
was over 200 days.
yeah, it was one of those things where it was, it was really harmful to people who were true baseball fans
Hmm.
because we'd never experienced not having a World Series, not having a playoffs.
Yeah.
We didn't know when it would finish. We kept thinking, oh, well, they're going to get it together and they'll get it together by the playoffs, right? Oh, well,
Hmm.
they're not getting it together, but they'll figure it out, and then we'll have abbreviated playoffs, and we'll at least have the World Series because you can't have a season without the World Series that hadn't happened for almost at that point 90 years or something
Yeah.
like that, right? Since
Hmm.
since they made the World Series.
Yes.
So at that point, it's like, okay, they'll figure it out. And then they didn't. And they said, we're officially going to cancel the season. It's going to be the first season without a World Series.
Hmm.
Even though we played World Series through World War II, we couldn't figure it out through a
Yeah.
strike, right? Um,
Hmm.
so that just really, even me at 11 years old, that just really pissed me off. I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine that they weren't doing that. And then when it dragged on through the hot stove league and into the next season, and it cost them some games into the next season before they figured it out, it was one of those things where I could see how casual fans were upset.
Hmm.
Some other fans didn't come back. Now, actually, the fans did start to come back slowly in '95, and by
Yeah.
'96, the stats show that they were pretty much back. You had some good games and everything. You had the Rangers doing their thing. You had teams competing, and the fans were back, but they weren't fully back until they
Hmm.
were invested in, you know, chicks like the long ball that
Yeah.
'98 season.
Hmm.
Um, but it did that whole time caused fans to really reconsider their love of the game and push them more toward football and toward the NBA that at the time
Yeah.
was arguably the best era ever for the NBA, right? The '90s
Yeah.
Jordan era.
Hmm.
So they had other options, so it pushed them more toward that when they were already kind of leaning toward that over the years. And then with changing TV rights deals and cables and baseball becoming
Hmm.
even more of a local sport and less of a national sport, then that really just implemented a time where if it weren't for the steroids and the home runs, I don't know that baseball would have come back quite
Yeah.
as much as it did. And so you don't want to risk having that again because baseball is in a far worse position now than it was back then when the
Hmm.
World Series was averaging, 25, 30 million viewers,
Hmm.
right? Now we're averaging what, 15,
Yeah.
13 million. I think
10
I
to
think it was like
15. Yeah.
9 or something this past
Mhm.
year. It was,
Yeah.
so it's very much a regional market now. It's the
Mhm.
one sport where people really still follow teams more than any other sport,
Yeah.
even football,
Yeah.
right? So if the players and the manager, I mean the owners can't get it together, then and they're just going to check out. They're going to go watch other things. They
Yeah.
also have other options for entertainment, video
Yeah.
games and YouTube and different things. So you need to keep fans invested however you can.
Yeah, and I think a big reason for that is football season because although baseball is America's pastime, the most popular sport in the country is definitely football. There's no doubt about
Yes,
that.
of course.
And when you look at the time on the calendar, the World Series start or the playoffs postseason starts in October and runs into the first week of November. Well, football season is in full swing at that point. So if your team's not invested, not in there in the hunt, not in the championship series
Mhm.
or whatever the case may be, you're probably going to choose, football more so than watching, even though it's the postseason for baseball, which in my opinion is one of the most exciting postseasons in American sports, especially when you look at the
I agree.
atmosphere and all that, uh, all those factors. But if I think that's a good point when it comes to the regional perspective that most baseball fans have. If your team's not involved, then you're really not going to be paying attention. Now, it's different when it comes to basketball and when it comes to football and maybe even hockey in some cases, that it's more fun to watch, even if as a neutral, as opposed to baseball. When it comes to baseball, even with all the rule changes, the quicker pace of the games and bigger bases, the more offensively driven rule changes, that you're still going to have that regional mindset because the season's so long, and you've seen enough baseball, but the football season has significantly less games and it's shorter. So I'd rather see football while I can, because my team's not in the postseason anymore. So why would I care? And I think that's how most baseball fans perceive it. At
Well, and
that
also
point in the year.
you have one player in baseball is not playing every play
Mm-hmm.
and cannot have a
Yep.
significant impact on the game
Mm-hmm.
as a player can in hockey or
Yeah.
in basketball, even in football, right? Particularly if it's the quarterback or the running back or a star
Mm-hmm.
wide receiver, defensive lineman, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can get invested in that game, even if it's not your team,
Mm-hmm.
because you still have those star players and it's
That
still
are in
exciting, right?
every snap and everything.
Every
Yeah.
snap,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yep.
And then the NBA has obviously prioritized, as Noe was saying on Outdrank the Coverage the other night,
Yep.
the NBA has prioritized its stars, right? It's a
Mhm.
national sport. It's an international sport now.
Yep.
And it's all about star coverage where teams don't even, players, not players, but fans don't even care about teams so much anymore. They just kind of follow players around to the different teams. They get the jerseys of the players they like and they play the video games using the players they like. So they do have some team investment for the local market, but not like anything like they do in baseball. Now,
Exactly.
baseball can, in some way right now, is trying to get out of that. They're really pushing. This is especially true in the Latin markets, because I'm in all the Latin Facebook groups and
Mhm.
Instagram and all that too, and I see how they're doing their marketing. They're really pushing it in those areas. The star players.
Yep.
Um, they have their own leagues and teams and all that, but they also follow majors. Everybody follows the majors, and
Mhm.
they push the Yankees, obviously. In Mexico, they really push the Dodgers. Um, so they do have their favorite teams who are the popular teams, right?
Mhm.
But they also cheer for all of the star players, and they really promote their star players.
Yes.
And baseball's starting to really try to promote Shohei and
Mhm.
and all of that. If they can really feed into that somehow without sacrificing the love of the team,
Mhm.
that would be what really kind of seals it and make sure that you don't slip back in terms of importance in the nation in terms of sports. But you also kind of like Noe is saying, you don't want it to be so much that you just stop caring about the local team
Mhm.
entirely.
Yeah.
So where's that fine line that you're trying to achieve without it being too much one way or the other?
Yeah, it's tough to find, especially with how long baseball season is,
Yes.
to just keep keep the fan base overall, or just not even just for your local team, but the baseball fan in general, consistently invested with what's going on every day in Major League Baseball. But because of all the sports that are going on, the NBA playoffs happens during baseball season. The NFL is in full swing in the latter half of baseball season. It's just, in the NCAA tournament happens kind of right before it. So there's kind of all these factors. And even now, even though I don't think it's as big as, compared to the other sports I just mentioned, but there's the spring football league. And there are football junkies out there who, even with the UFL out now, they'd rather watch that than baseball, their local teams, because by God, it's football.
Yeah, and you have the Arlington Renegades here who are actually
Mhm.
good, won it last year. So you
Yeah.
have somebody local for whom you
Mhm.
can cheer. But I would say that even this season will be different because you have the Olympics in Paris.
Yep.
So,
Oh,
for
that's
two
a
weeks,
good point
people are
too.
going to be invested in that.
Yep. And I mean, isn't baseball an Olympic sport as well?
It is, but I honestly don't follow it, the
Yeah, I
Olympic
don't
levels.
either, but because I don't know if it's always been a sport, or if it's just something that just came back. Because I know that every 3 or 4 years they have the World Baseball Classic as well, which they
That's the
have.
thing that I do follow. Yeah.
I love watching that. I think Japan won it last time. I think that I kind of got the years all mixed up now because I think they pushed it back a year during the COVID season because I think it was
Yeah.
supposed to be in 2020, but then they pushed it back to 2021. And I don't know if it's something they have every 2 years or every 4 years. I think it's every 4, kind of like the
Every
World Cup.
4. And Japan has won
So,
the last 2, so
so the
I
next
mean,
one probably won't be until next year or the year after.
right.
So, and it's just, I don't know. The point is all these different sports and events, especially with a year like this with the Olympics, so much is going on while baseball season is going on. So it's such a tall task for each promotions team and front office for each individual team, as well as the league as a whole, to keep their local fans as well as the baseball fan, the everyday baseball fan in general, invested in baseball season, at least for 90% of the season, because there's kind of drifting in and out regardless of if there's other sports going on. But when there's a year like this where the Olympics and the NBA playoffs, of course, every year is a thing, it's hard for them to do that. I don't want to say it's impossible to do it, but it's a really tall order for all these clubs to keep their fans invested at least as fully as possible for the duration of the entire season.
Right. And that's why partially they have prioritized the postseason as much as they have,
Mm-hmm.
because at least then you can get eyes on the product, right?
Yes.
And you have August. Well, there's preseason football, but most people don't really care about that. Even the NFL players don't care about that anymore.
Yeah.
So you have August, and then September football's just getting started. So you're seeing your final playoff runs. So baseball fans are still going to be invested because they're baseball fans, and you might draw in a few casuals, but probably not to the playoffs. But then the playoffs hit, yeah, you're there. I wish that they would kind of start it earlier so it doesn't buck up against peak mid NFL season.
I agree.
But that would change. You'd have to change the entire way you do business with the schedule and everything. I mean, because they're not going to start these games in February, right after the Super
No.
Bowl or anything. So that's never going to happen. You're just going to have to deal with that. But if you have a solid product, then it won't matter. Fans will be invested. But like we say, they're going to be invested for their local team. So if their team or there's not a good, is not in it, or a player who's not really exciting, or a team that's not really exciting, then it just doesn't move the meter.
And that's just how it is with baseball. And again, the really long
Yeah.
season has an effect on that as well with the other sports going on. But that's definitely something that we can definitely expand on more in the next episode. We might kind of touch on that a little bit, even though we'll be doing our first look back of the 94-95 strike next week here on Texas 2 Seam and Outdrink the Coverage. That could be a topic that we talk about because, again, although it's a look back, it's still going to be a happy hour, so we're kind of probably just going to go all over the place and go on tangents and stuff, which is fine. I enjoy when the shows like that because, when a shows is like formulaic, it kind of gets, it's easy to tune in and out. But when you're going kind of all over the place and just keeping the conversation kind of freely flowing, that helps a lot. And I think that's something that you and I, in the 2 instances now where we've had you on the show, it's been like that, which I love. It's just a natural conversation and it's stuff worth talking about. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something we'll probably talk about more in the future, just with baseball being such a long season with all these other sports conflicting, how and what measures can they take to keep the everyday baseball fan as well as the local fans invested at least more consistently than it seems to be at least right now. But that's something that we'll talk about further down the line as well. And I think that was a great way to close the show today with a look ahead to the first baseball look back on Outdrink the Coverage, which will be for episode 8 of Texas 2 Seam next week. We will have it live on Monday night, probably around 7:30. We'll start the stream there on YouTube.
Tell Noe that I won some wine at the Eric Nadel birthday bash auction.
Did you really?
Yeah, supporting charity for Eric Nadel and the Grant Halliburton Foundation.
Red or white?
Mental health for teens. So that was his thing this year. Because he's dealt with his own mental health issues publicly.
Yeah. I mean, he missed a lot of last season with that.
He did,
well.
yeah. So it's very important to him. But yeah, got a good Chardonnay, so that's what I'll be drinking while I watch you guys.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to be great. It's going to be a really fun show next week. Again, I didn't live through the 94-95 strike, but I think it's such an interesting topic because, again, it's not there's probably been like 10 or 12 lockouts in Major League Baseball throughout its history, but this was the longest by a considerable margin. So that's going to be really fun to talk about next week on Texas 2 Seam, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. I want to close the show today with, again, thanking our sponsors, Car Motor Company in downtown Cleburne. Again, they're at 302 South Caddo in downtown Cleburne. Again, they have a special going on right now. If you mention Texas 2 Seam on your next visit or phone call, and you can call them at 817-666-1111. You can get $200 off any vehicle purchase, whether it's late model or classic. You'll get $200 off if you mention Texas 2 Seam. And then again, Manscaped. Again, if you use our two codes, both 2Seam and ODTC for Outdrink the Coverage, you'll get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. So thanks again to our sponsors. And thanks again to you, Dr. J, for joining us on the show today. And we be looking forward to talking to you next week on the chat during our live show for our first baseball look back. Again, it'll be on the 94-95 MLB strike. So thanks again, Aaron, for joining us. And we'll talk to you next week, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you again for tuning in to episode 7 of the Texas 2 Seam podcast. Again, thanks again for bearing with us as we got an episode in a week late, but we're back on the saddle again. Appreciate you for joining us and being patient with us. Again, right here on the Texas 2 Seam podcast, part of Outdrink the Coverage on L4 Media. We will see you next Monday night live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, all the platforms. We'll have it posted on our social media pages across L4 Media and Outdrink the Coverage. We will see you next week for our live show next Monday at 7:30 right here on Texas 2 Seam. Thanks again, Aaron, and we will talk to you guys next week.